Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we want to talk about some new makeup releases, including the new Makeup by Mario collection and new Pat McGrath collection, including the quads, lipsticks, highlighters, everything, and my thoughts on that purchase and pass on everything that's been released in the past few days. And also I will be ranking my most recent purchases, so make sure that you're subscribed to be entered in regular giveaways. I've listed the details down below. Alright, so let's start with the famous makeup artist Mario. Went from arguably the best palette of all time to, well, let's start with the advertisement. This part right here looks like an iPhone commercial, like how iPhones are trying to be all slick and slimmer every time, and it's almost like, okay, now we're looking at a palette. It's very slim. These look a little bit like they have a lot of glitter on them for some reason. Of course, he's coming out with some brushes, and then we have the bad TV effect like what Pat McGrath does with the gliding gold. All right, now everything's going backwards like the new Christopher Nolan movie Tenet, and it's starting to look like those bricks from Inception. So yeah, it looks like he got inspiration from a lot of places, and I don't know yet if I'm sold on these products based on the promo, but what will I actually get? Usually from a new release, I always end up getting their eyeshadow palette, but this is an all shimmer eyeshadow palette, and I already own the new Viseart Volume 2 all shimmers palette, so I don't think I'm going to need to reach out for this one. And then also there's a neutral one, which I already have plenty of. There's one that you use a mixing liquid with, which looks sort of interesting, but I'm not really sold on any of them. So far the line hasn't sold me with the pictures, so we'll wait and see for actual swatches. Now the next product is the Pat McGrath Celestial Divinity. As I mentioned in my other video, the only non-repeat part is the middle, and I was hoping that those swatches would be more green, but it looks like they're actually more gold, so I'm not really sure about that yet, but the mini quads do look interesting. I'm really still hoping that I can fit the green into my Decadence Rose, but I think it'll be smaller pans now that it's only $78. The lipsticks and the lip balms don't really interest me. I feel that I already have these colors and I don't need another lip balm, and I already have a bunch of her lipsticks with a nice lip logo, so these aren't interesting to me. The quads, however, different story. I find them to be very interesting, and I think that for $60 to $8 each, they still might be worth it if there's some special shades in there, so I might actually be picking up all three of those. I want to rank my last 10 purchases, and I want to go through them really quickly, so I won't be doing full swatches, but this is my Khaki Haze. I don't think it was that good. Huda Khaki Haze had a lot of problems for me. The mattes were good, but the shimmers were way too glittery, and for that reason I wasn't that interested in this palette, and I feel that it was kind of a waste, so definitely don't recommend that palette. I prefer Terra Moons for shimmers and not Huda Beauty, so I prefer more indie brands, and I'll do more videos on that going forward. So Khaki Haze was definitely a miss for me, and I'll include it in my faves and fails for the month. Another thing I got from the Ciate website was these multi-chromes, and they are actually about like $10 cheaper than the Natasha Denona ones, but they still have a nice shift to them. I'm not going to go in depth with a lot of swatches because these also have a very short shelf life, so I'm just going to save that for another video when we're going to talk about multi-chromes. But overall I would say that they're like pretty okay, not as bad as the Huda Khaki for sure. And then I also got the Natasha Denona Glam palette. I was actually pleasantly surprised with that pink in that corner, and the overall quality of this palette I found that was much better than the ABH Sultry, which was a little bit too glittery compared to the Natasha Denona. So I'm actually excited to use this more, and I'll give you my final opinion at the end of the month for the faves and fails of the month of September. Next up was these ColourPop Land, and I don't really like ColourPop glittery formula, and I found that this actually left a bunch of glitter on my face. And compared to the Hourglass, Hourglass has never done that, and it's always given me a glow from within, but it was very similar to the release from 2 years ago, almost identical, but some of the shades were like slightly, ever so slightly darker and lighter compared to the one from 2 years ago. Now you might not see it very well on camera, but if you have the one from 2 years ago, you may definitely not need this at all. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I'm just a collector. Now, another disappointing one was the ColourPop Land, the Candy Castle. I find that these pastels don't really show well on my skin, and even though it's scented, it doesn't really smell that heavily or enough to make it worth it. Now, from this release, I also picked up the Super Shock blush, which was also a little bit wasteful. The blush, as you can see, has a chunk of glitter in it, so I don't know if it shows very well on camera, but if you put this blush on, the Super Shock blush, you're gonna have a ton of glitter on your face. So while it does smell really amazing, the blush is very, very scented in a good way. The glitter just really kills it for me. And again, if I want glitter, I'll go to those Terra Moons. Another product I wanted to talk to you about is these Too Faced holiday releases. So every year I've been picking up the lip set from like 2017, 2018, 2019. And this is the one from 2020, as you guys can see. It has the ugly sweaters on top of it. And each year the name that they give these ends up becoming the name of the palette for the future year. For example, they had Cinnamon Bear last year, and this year Cinnamon Bear is a palette. They had Pumpkin Spice, and Pumpkin Spice became a palette. And then they had Cookies and Cream, which became a palette on that same year. So I feel that if you look at the names of these lip products, you're going to end up seeing these exact names on a palette. I also have the mini palette, the mini gingerbread spice, and the salted caramel, which I'll talk to you guys about. And the candy cane one, even though it's the same as candy cane from last year, it does not smell the same, and it's not even the same color. Like the one from this year is more like a red, and not really pink like last year. And the candy cane smell is more like a minty, like a horrible gum mint taste, versus the candy cane from last year, which the formula was, I thought, pretty good. It was more like a peppermint flavor. So if you ask me which one I prefer, I definitely prefer last year's formula and taste, and I feel that they should have just kept the same formula. I don't know why it just got confused with a bubblegum flavor. Next is the Cookies and Cream one. That's the exact same shade as the one that was released last year. It's a little too light to show on my skin, and I'll show you guys the swatches in a moment with everything else. Next is the Cinnamon Apple. Again, this doesn't smell like cinnamon apple. It was more like just a general sugar smell to it. And then let me show you the swatch for the previous one that I just talked about. You see, it doesn't really show very well on my skin, and again, it just has a sugary scent to it. Now the Hot Toddy, I expected it to smell really amazing. Again, this one also was just more like a sugary spice smell, and it didn't really smell like a Hot Toddy. I've had those in Scotland before, and not really anything similar to the scent that I was hoping it would have. A little too thick also as a liquid lipstick. I feel that these sets in general are made for gifting and not really made for a person that is truly a lipstick lover or collector. And well, I know I collect them, but here, look at last year's. Last year had this pumpkin spice lipstick, very much similar to what we saw with the palette. It was pretty good quality compared to and it does actually remind me of the pumpkin spice palette, and it's very similar to the full size one that was released this year. Cookies and Cream was a repeat of this year, exact same scent, exact same feel and formula. I'll swatch them side by side so you guys can see it's almost like identical. And then what else did we get last year? I think everything last year was just like generally either the same or better than this year. Like the Cinnamon Bear, okay, that one didn't really like taste like a cinnamon bear, but it was still more tolerable than what was released this year. And the red was a lot more like deep. Everything last year was so much better. Even the next flavor, which is the hot and buttered rum, was another similar name for the palette that came out last year. The palette smelled like hot butter rum. The lipstick smelled like hot butter rum. everything was just so much more consistent in 2019, and that was the same for Too Faced. Again, this year it doesn't seem to be a good year for them. I prefer last year's over the release of this year, and I feel that they can do so much better. But if you're wondering if they did anything right this year, I will say that the pumpkin spice lipstick, which was just a full size of what was released in the mini kit last year, I think that was one of my favorites. And I haven't talked so much about favorites with Too Faced this year, but overall, compared to other things that they've released in full size over the holidays, for example, the gingerbread woman and then the gingerbread man, I think that the color was definitely more wearable, because if you look at them side by side, those were like slightly more orangey or more like darker red, and this one was definitely more of a wearable color, and I did like the scent of that. So yes, that I think that one thing this year was a hit. And then the year before that, they came out with the glosses. I'm not going to go through the details of the year before that because you probably can't find them anyway. Lastly, of the Too Faced holiday collection, I did pick up the salted caramel, even though I said I wasn't going to. I was intrigued because it had some nice oranges in there. One thing that really surprised me about this and the gingerbread spice is that neither of them smelled like anything, like literally no scent to any of them. I was really surprised because I was expecting a little bit of scent to them, and you see there's not a whole lot of range with the colors. It's just mostly oranges. The gingerbread spice definitely does have more range to it, but also doesn't have any scent, unlike the bigger palette. So that was kind of weird for me. And knowing that I already have the larger gingerbread spice palette, I don't think I'll be reaching out for the small one as much, because the thing that really fascinated me about the bigger one, I guess, was mostly the holiday scent and the variety. Like, never underestimate that what a green can do for a palette visually, because the smaller one doesn't have that green in there or like the variety of colors in there. So you're basically just stuck with like a dark maroon color and like a few pops of orange. You don't get that nice shifty green, and it's mostly matte. So I'm not really like super stoked about the small one at all, especially now it doesn't have any scent either. It's just like, what am I even doing with this palette? Like, if I wanted to grab a palette to go, it probably wouldn't be this mini. I'd probably get the salted caramel one, even though it doesn't have as much range. It still has like enough variety. My favorite again was probably the lip product of the year and the pumpkin spice palette and the lip kit set. I feel that it's only good for gifting, not really good for a collector. Now, another product I have Too Faced I picked up was the Marielle palette. I'll talk about that in detail in another video. It's just too many things to look at once. I haven't had a chance to really like get to play with this palette since I just received it, but right off the bat I will say it's just what I expected. Like, you get a bunch of decent quality mattes and a bunch of not so decent quality shimmers, so I kind of predicted that. And then the other one is the ColourPop Garden variety. I will probably play with this a little more, but I'm actually kind of impressed with the color story, and I will talk about that one in detail. Let me know in the comment section which one you want me to like really go into detail with. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much again for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time.